Hello, imagine this. You are a great duke, the ruler of vast lands, a man whose name is spoken with fear and awe throughout France. Behind you are wars, intrigues, victories, and defeats. You are used to commanding the fates of others, to seeming immortal, to being at the center of every conspiracy. But in the end, it all ends the same way for everyone. But before you get comfortable, make sure to like this video and subscribe to the channel and let me know in the comments which city you are watching from and what time it is there. I'm really curious to see who has joined us. Now, get comfortable. We're about to begin. You wake up in your bed and you remember, in the most matter of fact way, that you are John the Fearless, Duke of Burgundy. This is neither surprising nor comforting. You have been the Duke for quite some time, and the weight of the title is less impressive to you now than the weight of your own body pressing into the mattress. You are, by any reasonable account, not young anymore. You have outlived many of your enemies and a handful of your friends. 48 years is an age at which most men in your line of work have long since been murdered, beheaded, or quietly disposed of with something suspicious in their wine. You, however, have survived. Your reward for this achievement is simple. You are very tired. You do not recall a time when your joints did not ache. You get up, and the cold stone floor feels like a personal insult. There is a dull pain in your back, as if you are carrying an invisible hunchback with you, and your feet protest with each step. You tell yourself that this is all perfectly normal. You are a busy man. You have affairs of state, wars to worry about, plots to direct, and all sorts of people to threaten or flatter. Who would not be weary? Who would not feel a little ill from time to time? Yet beneath all these perfectly reasonable explanations, there is a faint, persistent sense that something is not quite right. It has been there for weeks now. Or is it months? Time blurs together when you are surrounded by bad news and worse company. You remember feeling a strange chill in your bones during the last council meeting. Your hands, once so steady when signing decrees or grasping swords, now tremble ever so slightly. At dinner, you find yourself staring at the food longer than usual, debating whether your appetite is gone or whether you are simply too wary to eat. You settle for bread. Bread is safe. Bread has never betrayed you. The castle is not the friendliest place to be unwell. The draft sneaks through every crack in the stone walls, and the fire in your chamber never seems to burn hot enough. Your bed is a fine one, but no amount of luxury can make you forget the chill that seems to live in your marrow. Every cough echoes through your ribs. Each sneeze is a tiny rebellion of your body. Sometimes you wonder if your body has begun conspiring against you, joining the ranks of your many enemies outside these walls. You are, of course, still expected to perform your duties. You attend meetings with your counselors, who look at you with an odd mix of deference and calculation. Some of them watch for signs of weakness. Others genuinely hope you recover. You have lost track of which is which, and at this point, you are not sure it matters. Your voice, once commanding, now sometimes cracks. You pretend not to notice. So do they. Your wife visits you in the mornings. She asks after your health in a tone so neutral it could be a threat or an expression of concern. You reply that you are feeling well, as always, and she smiles the way one smiles at a child who claims not to have eaten the last sweetmeat. After she leaves, you wonder if she believes you, then you wonder if you believe yourself. Outside, France is falling apart. The king is mad, the dauphin is unreliable, and the English are forever a looming shadow. Civil war is not so much a threat as a backdrop, a persistent humming in the background of every conversation. If you died today, you suspect the world would not pause to mourn. It would simply shift its weight and carry on crushing whoever is next in line. There is a moment each evening, just before you drift off to a restless sleep, when you consider the possibility that this might not be exhaustion or melancholy, but something more sinister. Illness is the great equalizer. You have sent men to their deaths for less than a sneeze in the wrong place. Perhaps this is justice, or perhaps it is just bad luck. You are not sure which is more tedious. In the morning, you wake up again. The aches have not gone away. The castle is as cold as ever. You are still John the Fearless, but you are not so certain about the fearless part. You get up anyway. What else is there to do? The world is waiting, and it does not care how you feel. You tell yourself that you are only tired. You tell yourself this every day. Eventually, you might even believe it. You have always considered yourself resilient, perhaps even untouchable, as if the title of John the Fearless provided an invisible armor against everything from assassins to the common cold. Yet the days have been stretching into nights filled with a deep, marrow-freezing chill, and the slow, aching misery of your own body is starting to become impossible to ignore. You are no stranger to discomfort. You have worn heavy armor for days on end, slept in muddy fields during campaign seasons, and endured the endless drone of nobles arguing about whose goat ate whose crops. All of that feels preferable to what you experience now. It begins subtly, as these things often do. A sense of malaise, a fatigue that is difficult to justify, even to yourself. You rise from bed already exhausted, your dreams feverish and unsatisfying, plagued with indistinct memories of battles fought and bargains broken. Your mouth tastes of copper and old regrets. You stare at your reflection in a polished piece of silver and barely recognize the face that looks back. Your eyes, once sharp and quick to spot an enemy across a crowded hall, are rimmed with red, and the skin beneath them sags like the folds of a worn out curtain. Your courtiers notice, of course. They notice everything. Their gazes linger a little too long on your trembling hands when you reach for a goblet, when you cough, a deep, rattling sound that comes from somewhere in your chest. The conversation stops for a heartbeat and then resumes as if nothing has happened. This is the way of the court. Politeness is a shield, and everyone is too afraid or too opportunistic to ask what is truly wrong. You almost admire it. Almost. On the third morning, the fever comes. It is not a dramatic event. There are no sudden collapses, no scenes worthy of a troubadour's ballad. You simply wake up sweating, your nightclothes clinging to your body, and your thoughts slipping away from you like eels in a barrel. The sheets are damp and cold, and you shiver despite the heavy woolen blankets layered over you. You call for more firewood, but the servants already stoke the hearth to the point where the stones themselves sweat. Your appetite deserts you. The kitchen prepares everything you could possibly want: roast venison, fresh bread, even sweetmeats imported at ludicrous expense. You push the food around on your plate, pretending to eat. If anyone is watching, you do not care. Hunger is for the living and the ambitious. You are neither, at least not this morning. The aches become a constant companion. Your limbs feel as if they have been weighed down with stones. When you walk, you do so with the slow deliberation of someone much older, a parody of the Grand Duke you once were. You try to mask it with bravado, but it is difficult to swagger when each step feels like a negotiation with your knees and hips. Stairs, which you once bounded up two at a time, now seem as insurmountable as the walls of a besieged city. Sometimes you wonder if you are simply imagining it all. Perhaps this is what it means to be middle aged, to have lived a life filled with too many battles, too many sleepless nights, and far too many arguments about matters that seemed so important at the time and now seem impossibly trivial. Perhaps everyone feels like this, but nobody admits it. Perhaps the world is run by exhausted men pretending otherwise. The coughing grows worse. Sometimes, when you are alone, you spit into a handkerchief and examine the flecks of blood with a curious detachment, as if they belong to someone else. You have seen enough men die to recognize the signs. You would laugh at the irony if laughing did not make your chest hurt so much. Your family continues their routines. Your wife is attentive in the way that a woman must be when her husband controls her fate. Your children are alternately curious and aloof, depending on their ages and their ambitions. You notice how your advisors begin to gather in smaller, more conspiratorial groups. You overhear whispers about succession, about alliances, about what will happen when you are gone. You consider reminding them that you are not dead yet, but you are too tired to bother. You find yourself thinking about simpler times, before the title, before the endless responsibilities. You remember running through fields as a boy, catching frogs and coming home covered in mud. You do not remember being sick then. Now the prospect of running, even walking without pain, seems as fantastical as alchemy. You tell yourself that it is nothing. You have endured wounds, poisonings, betrayals, heartbreak. This, you assure yourself, is just another trial to overcome. Yet the illness does not care about your assurances, your titles, or your history. It seeps into every part of your life, turning each day into a negotiation and each night into a battle. There is a kind of dark comedy in all of this. You, who once led armies and dictated the fate of kingdoms, are now outwitted by a cough and a fever. The world outside continues to unravel. Civil wars, mad kings, ambitious rivals, but inside these stone walls, your universe has shrunk to the confines of your sick room and the relentless ticking of your own weakening heart. You begin to realize, with a kind of grim amusement, that being John the Fearless will not save you from the slow, ignoble indignities of disease. You tell yourself once again that it is just exhaustion, that you will recover, that you must recover. Then you lie back, close your eyes, and try to believe it, even as the illness takes another small victory. You do not remember when the physician started multiplying in your chamber. At first, there was only one, the family doctor, a grim old man with a beard that smelled faintly of vinegar and resignation. He used to seem knowledgeable, even comforting, in the way that people who are convinced of their own competence always do. Now he is joined by a second, younger man who is said to have studied at the University of Paris, where the latest medical wisdom is debated by men in expensive hats. Then comes a third, whose principal qualification is his ability to quote Galen at great length, whether or not anyone asks him to. There are now so many doctors in your room that you begin to wonder if the real disease is contagious optimism, and the only cure is a university degree. They huddle together, whispering over vials of your urine, which they examine as if they are gazing at a scrying mirror. They murmur about humors, colors, thickness, temperature, and above all, the signs of imbalance. Each man has his own theory: excess bile, blocked phlegm, corrupted blood. One suggests you have been struck by an ill wind, possibly from sleeping with the window open. Another suspects that melancholy, the most fashionable of afflictions, has taken root in your spleen. You are not privy to their discussions, except when they decide it is time for a performance. A small crowd assembles at your bedside. The oldest physician clears his throat and announces, with the solemnity usually reserved for state funerals, that bloodletting is required. There is a delicate balance, he explains, between the four humors, and yours are clearly out of order. No one asks which humor is at fault. The answer is always all of them. Your sleeve is rolled up with all the dignity of a condemned criminal preparing for execution. The doctor's assistant, a boy with nervous hands, brings forth a basin and a set of knives that have clearly seen better, sharper days. You are assured this is a routine operation, that kings and paupers alike are subjected to this ritual. You marvel at how often routine means completely ineffective. The blood flows, sluggish and dark. The basin fills slowly. The room smells of iron and fear. You stare at the ceiling, trying to remember a time when your body was your own. The physicians watch with clinical detachment, as if your life is a long experiment in their private contest. The bleeding stops before you lose consciousness, which is counted as a medical triumph. They promise relief. You are told you will feel lighter, less burdened by your malady. Instead, you feel like a wineskin left out in the sun, wrung dry by the very people who are supposed to help you. Your head swims. Your limbs grow colder. When you attempt to stand, the world tilts at an alarming angle. You sit back down. The physicians are undeterred. The next day, a new course of treatment is proposed. This time, it involves a bewildering assortment of herbs. Some ground into powder, others steeped in boiling water, and still others bundled together and tied to your wrists with strips of linen. You are expected to inhale their fumes, drink their brews, and generally allow yourself to be transformed into an ambulatory spice rack. The taste is indescribable. It is both bitter and strangely sweet, a flavor that lingers long after you have finished swallowing, as if the herbs themselves refuse to abandon your tongue. They rub ointments into your skin, some of which smell reassuringly of rosemary and thyme, others less reassuringly of rendered animal fat and despair. Every concoction is presented as the product of proven wisdom. Each doctor assures you that this particular recipe was successful for a cousin, a neighbor, or, in one memorable case, a goat. Your body is not impressed. The fever ebbs and flows, sometimes receding for a few hours, only to return stronger than before. Your sleep is restless, interrupted by chills, sweats, and the endless parade of doctors with new theories. You wonder how many herbs there are in Christendom and whether you will be made to try every single one. No one ever asks you what you want. This is not a time for preferences. This is the age of authority, and the authorities in your room wield their knowledge like blunt instruments. They are not malicious, only certain. You envy their certainty. Your family watches all of this with the detachment of people observing a play. Your wife, always proper, sits quietly in the corner, hands folded, face impassive. The servants come and go, some with genuine concern, others with the wary glance of people who do not wish to be blamed when the inevitable happens. You are, in every sense, at the mercy of the experts. The days blur together in a haze of bloodletting, herbal brews, and the persistent, unyielding ache in your bones. You begin to wonder if the illness is actually a contest. Who will tire first, you or the physicians? You have always fancied yourself a man of endurance, but the disease, abetted by the best minds of your time, is slowly winning. At last, the doctors agree to pause their treatments, if only to observe the results of their efforts. They will return tomorrow with new ideas and new ways to explain your suffering. You close your eyes, not because you hope for rest, but because you are simply too weary to watch any longer. And so the game continues, played with knives, herbs, and endless certainties, as the world outside your window goes on, blissfully unaware of your slow, methodical unraveling. You have always known that pain is an unavoidable part of living, but you never imagined how much of it would be self-inflicted in the name of healing. The physicians, with the solemnity of priests, have declared that your salvation lies in yet another round of bloodletting. You are not consulted, of course. Your body, your blood, your opinion, all are the property of men who know Latin. This time, there is even more ceremony. The senior physician enters your chamber flanked by his assistants, each bearing a different instrument of misery: brass bowls, linen rags, a knife whose edge is more theoretical than real. The air is thick with the smell of hot wax, boiled linens, and the faint aroma of fear, which no amount of incense can mask. Your family is present, standing at a respectful distance, as if watching a particularly unentertaining spectacle at court. You sit on the edge of your bed, sleeve rolled up, wrist presented like an offering. The old physician mutters a prayer in Latin, possibly to God, possibly to Galen. His hands are cold. He examines your arm, pinching the flesh as if searching for a memory or a confession. The assistant approaches, holding a basin that has seen far too much noble blood in its time. There is a prick, sharp but brief. Then comes the slow, oozing release as your blood trickles down your arm, pooling in the bowl with a sound that is both wet and final. You watch, detached, as if this is all happening to someone else, perhaps a lesser duke, perhaps a peasant in a hut. The physician watches as well, eyes narrowed, waiting for some sign that the humors are being appeased. You are assured that the color of your blood is most interesting, though the precise meaning is reserved for those with medical degrees. The blood is darker than you would prefer, and the physician pronounces this a sign of an overabundance of melancholy. You are tempted to argue that melancholy seems a reasonable response to your situation, but your energy is too precious to waste on jokes. The process continues. You are bled until you begin to feel lightheaded, then limp, then almost weightless. The room sways gently, and you cling to consciousness like a man hanging from a fraying rope. The physician nods with satisfaction and signals his assistants to bind your arm. They use a strip of linen soaked in vinegar. Cleanliness, after all, is the hallmark of modern medicine. You expect relief. You are promised relief. Instead, you feel as if your spirit is leaking out alongside your blood, leaving only an empty husk. The ache in your bones deepens. Your skin, clammy with sweat, is as pale as the sheets you rest on. When you attempt to stand, the world tilts away, and you are forced to collapse gracelessly back onto the mattress. The physicians confer in the corner. Their whispers are filled with optimism, or perhaps just bravado. They discuss the success of the procedure as if you are a problem already solved, a disease already vanquished. They congratulate one another in low voices. The oldest one looks at you with a gaze that is part pity, part curiosity, like a man watching a rainstorm from the safety of his porch. Your family is called back in. They are told you are doing well, all things considered. Your wife nods, her expression unchanged. Your children peek at you from behind her skirts, eyes wide with fascination and dread. Servants bring more broth, more blankets, more prayers. The fire is stoked higher. Your only comfort is that you are too weak to feel the cold as acutely as before. For the rest of the day, you drift in and out of a shallow sleep. Your dreams are filled with rivers of blood, leeches the size of hounds, and faceless doctors chanting in Latin. You awake each time more exhausted than before, drenched in sweat, throat parched and raw. When evening falls, the physicians return. They declare your humors to be in better balance, though they caution that more bloodletting may be needed. Medicine, it seems, is an endless process of subtraction. You wonder, idly, how much blood you actually possess and how much must be spilled before the scales tip in your favor. The world outside your chamber continues on without you. Somewhere, Men fight and die for causes you barely remember. Taxes are collected, laws are debated, and alliances are forged and broken. Within your room, time seems to slow to a crawl, measured only by the increments of blood lost and the deepening shadow of fatigue. You begin to understand, with grim resignation, that the cure is as relentless as the disease. Your body, once your loyal servant, is now the battleground between fever and physician, pain and prescription. You are a spectator in your own slow motion undoing. As the candles burn low, you wonder how many more rounds of healing you can endure. The physicians assure you that hope is on the horizon. You suspect it is merely circling, waiting for the right moment to land. You close your eyes, trying to ignore the pounding in your ears and the weakness in your limbs. You tell yourself, as always, that this is merely a trial. You will recover. You must recover. The alternative is simply too tedious to contemplate, even as you feel it drawing closer, drop by drop. You might have thought, in a moment of fleeting optimism, that after so much bloodletting, there would be little left for your doctors to do but let you sleep in peace. You are mistaken. If there is one thing the medical profession of your era excels at, it is inventing new ways to keep a patient uncomfortably alive. There is no limit to their creativity, nor to their faith in the curative power of anything that is not actual rest. It begins with a goblet. The liquid inside is a color unknown in nature, the sort of thing that might ooze from a dying star or the depths of an unlucky swamp. You are informed that this is an infusion of rare herbs, imported at ruinous expense from distant lands, whose names you have only ever seen in poorly translated books. You take a sip. It is both bitter and sweet, pungent and flat, as if all flavors have gathered here for a funeral. You wonder briefly if you are the guest of honor. The parade of remedies does not end with potions. There are powders, ground roots, dried beetles, substances scraped from rocks that only monks with too much time on their hands can locate. Some are stirred into your wine, others are smeared onto your gums. There is a paste made from crushed pearls and another from burnt feathers. Both are equally inedible, but you swallow them anyway, urged on by the solemn nodding of your physicians. You are told that pearls purify the blood, and feathers, for reasons lost to time, calm the internal organs. You have always suspected that your internal organs could use a stern talking to. There are also broths, thick and suspiciously lumpy. Some taste like the memory of meat. Others are so heavily spiced that you can barely tell what lurks beneath the cumin and cinnamon. You are told that each spoonful contains an essence of something that once was alive: a stag's antler, a lizard's tail, the heart of a songbird. Everything has healing properties if you can say its name in Latin. One day, a physician arrives bearing a jar of something green and viscous. He assures you, with great gravity, that this is a prized ointment made from unicorn horn. You look at him, then at the jar, then back at him, and you want to ask whether he believes in unicorns or only in the fees he collects for each new miracle. But you lack the energy for sarcasm. The ointment is applied to your temples. It is sticky, and it smells faintly of horse and parsley. You suspect the horn is more mundane than advertised. The true highlight of your treatment is a suspension made from dried snake. The physician recites a lengthy account of how the snake was captured during a full moon, purified with wine, and then dried in the sun for 7 days. This, you are told, is essential for the proper extraction of its healing powers. You think about all the things that have happened to you in 7 days and how none of them made you feel remotely better. Still, you swallow the potion, which tastes exactly as you would expect, like dust, old leather, and an unpleasant sense of futility. The remedies are not limited to what goes into your mouth. There are compresses made from boiled onions, which are wrapped around your ankles until you smell like a forgotten stew. There are poultices pressed against your chest, made of mustard seeds and pig fat. Every application is accompanied by a story about some duke or cardinal who made a miraculous recovery. You notice that these stories never end with the phrase, and he died horribly the next day, though you suspect that is often the case. Sometimes, when your mind is clear enough, you try to calculate how many cures you have consumed. You lose track somewhere after the 12th goblet and the 7th unidentifiable powder. You wonder if anyone has ever been killed by an excess of remedies rather than by the disease itself. You decide not to ask. Your family continues to hover. Your wife watches the process with the expression of someone attending a public execution, polite interest mixed with a touch of nausea. Your children visit less often now, though one brave soul leaves a sprig of rosemary on your pillow for remembrance. You consider asking them to fetch something less aromatic and more effective, but you do not wish to discourage initiative. Through it all, the physicians remain relentlessly cheerful. Each new concoction is greeted as if it is the long awaited answer to all your prayers. When you protest, you are reminded of the importance of hope, which apparently comes in powdered, liquid, and occasionally gelatinous forms. You wonder, with the last flicker of your former wit, if hope could be made into a poultice for your aching head. As the days blur together, your illness remains unimpressed. The fever continues its slow dance in your veins, indifferent to pearls, snakes, or unicorns. You drift in and out of sleep, your dreams filled with images of forests, snakes, and noble beasts who would doubtless prefer their horns remain attached. Sometimes you wake to find a new compress being applied or a new potion waiting by your bed. You swallow, you endure, you wait. There is a peculiar comfort in the routine. Every day brings a new miracle, every night a new disappointment. You have become a connoisseur of flavor and sensation, a reluctant expert in the world of medieval medicine. You tell yourself, as always, that tomorrow you will feel better. Tomorrow you will walk the halls again, laugh at the absurdity of it all, and perhaps even eat something that does not taste like defeat. For now, you close your eyes and listen to the sounds of your physicians preparing another remedy. You are, it seems, in good hands. If by good, one means persistent, inventive, and completely undeterred by failure. You are not sure what tomorrow will bring, but you are reasonably certain it will not be a cure. You would think, as John the Fearless, that your authority extends to every corner of your household, that loyalty is as natural and inevitable as dust gathering on the tapestries. You are wrong. Even the greatest of lords cannot keep watch over every whisper, every sideways glance exchanged in the half shadow of a cold, echoing corridor. Now, as your illness grows bolder and your steps grow weaker, you notice the invisible lines being drawn in your own castle, the shifting alliances, the tiny acts of rebellion, no less real for being so quiet. The servants who once scurried at your command now move through your rooms with a peculiar mixture of exaggerated care and thinly disguised impatience. Their deference has the brittle quality of a mask worn too long. When you call for water, it arrives slightly cooler than you prefer, and the bread is never as fresh as it used to be. These are not accidents. These are the small revenges of those who know their master is weakened and whose futures are suddenly uncertain. You hear them at night when they believe you are asleep, low voices drifting through the cracks of doors, murmuring in the kitchen and at the well. They discuss your condition with the relish of people whose lives have always been shaped by the whims of those above them. How long do you have? They wonder. Is it weeks or only days? Is this the sort of fever that burns itself out, or the kind that smolders until there is nothing left to consume? No one is brave enough to say these things to your face, but their curiosity is boundless in private. The most experienced among them speak with authority. They have seen this before with an uncle, a former master, a neighbor who coughed himself to death one winter. The story always ends the same way. They gossip about the doctors, too, mocking their robes, their pronouncements, the endless parade of potions and powders. Some bet on which cure will kill you first. Others claim that nothing will change, that dukes never die. They only linger until the walls themselves grow tired of listening to them. The cook, who has served 3 generations, shakes her head and mutters that no one should trust a man who puts mustard on a wound and calls it science. Her apprentice giggles until the cook silences her with a look that brooks no argument. Even servants have their hierarchies. Your room is no longer a sanctuary, it is a crossroads for rumors. Servants pass through, carrying linens, broth, and news. Their eyes flicker from your face to the floor and back again, searching for signs. Are you sleeping or merely pretending? Will you notice if the blanket is folded carelessly, if the fire burns too low? The boldest among them linger a moment too long, peering at you as if they might see something your doctors have missed. Some seem almost disappointed when you open your eyes and ask for more wine. Your illness is a topic of fascination, but so too is your mortality. In the kitchens, in the stables, by the laundry fires, they speculate about the future. Who will inherit? What will become of the estate? Will the next duke be kinder, stricter, more generous with coin or with beatings? Every servant is an expert in the art of prediction. Bets are placed in secret, not only on the hour of your death, but on the contents of your will, the character of your heirs, the likelihood that the next master will take a new mistress from among their ranks. You do not resent them for this. You have seen enough of the world to know that hope, for people like them, comes in small, practical forms: an extra ration of bread, a kinder steward, a moment of warmth beside the kitchen fire. Your suffering is a backdrop for their dreams. Your death, when it comes, will be a brief scandal, soon replaced by the daily necessities of feeding pigs, scrubbing pots, and avoiding the wrath of those who replace you. Yet their curiosity is not entirely without malice. Some servants watch your decline with a satisfaction so carefully hidden it is almost a skill. These are the ones who remember every insult, every command delivered in anger, every night spent waiting in the cold for a master who never came. For them, your illness is not a tragedy, but a correction, a sign that even the greatest are not immune to the slow, grinding justice of time. You hear other things too. There are rumors of strange noises at night, of cold drafts that slip under doors and extinguish candles without warning. Some whisper that your illness is not natural, that it was sent by an enemy, a rival, or even a member of your own household. The more superstitious mutter prayers against the evil eye, crossing themselves as they pass your chamber. A kitchen boy leaves a sprig of garlic by your bed just in case. And yet, life continues. The routines of the castle are as relentless as your fever. Meals are served, sheets are changed, floors are swept. No one weeps, at least not where you can see them. Your suffering is just another fact to be managed, another burden to be carried until it shifts, as all things do, to someone else. You watch the faces of your servants, trying to read their thoughts, but they reveal nothing. Their smiles are polite, their movements careful, their words just formal enough to avoid rebuke. You realize, with a kind of weary amusement, that you are no longer the master of this house. Not really. Authority has passed, for now, to the invisible council of those who clean, cook, and whisper. As you drift in and out of feverish sleep, you wonder what they will say about you when you are gone. Will they remember your generosity, your temper, your victories in battle, or will you be reduced to a cautionary tale, a once great man who grew weak and died, despite all the doctors, the prayers, and the mountains of remedies? You suspect it will be the latter, but you also suspect that in the end, it will not matter. The whispers will fade, the beds will be remade, and someone else's story will take your place. For now you listen to the voices drifting through the stone halls, and you try to decide whether it is better to be feared, pitied, or simply ignored. You suspect you will not have to choose for much longer. Eventually, your decline attracts not just physicians and gossip, but faith. Where knives and potions fail, the holy relics are called for, because in this world, if a bit of dried bone wrapped in gold cannot cure you, surely nothing can. Faith, after all, is the oldest remedy, and as the lord of a realm where saints compete with sickness, you are expected to leave no stone unturned, or, more accurately, no bone unrevered. The procession of relics begins early in the morning. It starts with the arrival of a local priest whose expression is a blend of grave concern and practical calculation. He brings a small reliquary, a delicate silver box, polished until it gleams, containing something that once belonged to someone holy, or so the paperwork claims. He holds it out to you with trembling hands, as if expecting a miracle to leap out at any moment and chase the fever from your body. You receive the relic, as all great men must, with appropriate reverence and the faint hope that it is not merely a splinter from a carpenter's bench. You are told the relic is a fragment of the robe worn by Saint Martin. You are not entirely sure which part of the robe it is, or how it survived centuries of devotion, travel, and wars. But you nod, because faith requires compliance, and so does tradition. The priest presses the relic to your forehead and mumbles a prayer that is more formula than plea. For a few moments, nothing happens. You are not surprised. Relics are not limited to the clergy's collection. Word spreads, and soon other hopefuls arrive, bearing their own treasures. A sliver of bone from Saint Denis, a scrap of cloth from Saint Genevieve, a vial of dust allegedly gathered at the Holy Sepulchre. Each item is brought to your bedside with the seriousness usually reserved for the signing of treaties. Your wife supervises the process, determined that no lesser relic will touch your fevered brow. Somewhere in the house, a monk with an unfortunate cough insists on reading from a book of miracles, reciting the names of those who recovered from mortal illness through the intervention of holy remains. The stories are, it must be said, deeply unconvincing. You listen politely as he describes a baker cured of boils by the knuckle of Saint Blaise, a merchant delivered from blindness by the sandal of Saint Peter. If you could, you would ask whether any nobleman of your rank has been revived from the brink of death by a toenail, but you suspect irony is lost on the faithful. You submit to the rituals. The relics are pressed to your forehead, your chest, and your wrists. Prayers are murmured over your body, candles lit in your honor. Incense is burned until your chamber resembles the inside of a cathedral, thick with the sweet, suffocating promise of salvation. For a moment, your fever lifts, but only because you are forced to cough and choke on the heavy smoke. Each day brings a new relic, a new hope, a new disappointment. One relic, brought by a visiting bishop, is wrapped in so many layers of silk that it is difficult to tell whether it contains anything at all. The bishop assures you that this particular item has healed 3 cardinals and a famous hound. The hound, apparently, recovered in time to sire a new generation of miracle dogs. You try not to laugh, mostly because it would hurt your chest. The relics become a part of your routine. Each morning, a different piece of the sacred is laid upon your body. Each evening, a new litany of saints is invoked. Your physicians are not pleased by the interference, but they dare not argue with the combined authority of faith and family. Sometimes you catch them rolling their eyes behind the priest's back. At other times, they murmur about the power of belief, though you suspect their true faith is reserved for vinegar and bloodletting. Your family's faith is more practical. Your wife oversees the rituals with a careful eye, making sure no opportunity for intervention is overlooked. She supervises the placement of candles and relics, orchestrates the prayers, and makes notes of which saints seem most promising. You suspect she is compiling a report for future reference, or perhaps simply looking for a scapegoat in the event of failure. Your children are alternately fascinated and bored by the process. One child, emboldened by the presence of so many holy objects, attempts to sneak a touch, hoping for a miracle of their own. You do not blame them. Despite the best efforts of saints, priests, and hopeful relatives, your fever remains stubborn. The relics, for all their history and supposed virtue, are no more effective than the potions and powders. Your dreams are unchanged, still filled with fire, with rivers, with the echo of prayers spoken in the dark. Sometimes, in the haze between sleep and waking, you imagine that the saints themselves are watching, their faces a mixture of pity and impatience. Even miracles, you suspect, are rationed in these difficult times. Eventually, the supply of relics is exhausted, or at least the patience of those who bring them. The priests begin to speak more cautiously about God's will. The monks grow less enthusiastic in their chants, their voices tired from repetition. The bishop returns to his see, taking his miraculous hound with him. Life in your household resumes its uneasy rhythm. The relics are packed away, ready for the next emergency or the next duke. You are left with the scent of incense in your sheets and a persistent ringing in your ears. The fever lingers, unimpressed by centuries of faith. You tell yourself that in the end, all relics are just reminders of the dead, fragile, precious, and powerless against the relentless logic of disease. You have played your part in the great theater of hope. Now, as the last candle sputters out, you realize that even faith cannot change the simple, dull fact of your suffering. You are not cured, you are not even comforted, but you are at least entertained. There is a peculiar law in your world. Every weakening heartbeat inside these castle walls sounds like a victory drum to someone outside. For every night you spend shivering with fever, there is a dinner table in some rival's hall where goblets are raised just a little higher, toasts made just a little more cheerfully. There is nothing quite so energizing to your enemies as the knowledge that John the Fearless, scourge of Paris and terror of Armagnac alike, is now locked in a losing skirmish with his own body. You imagine them, those faces you have stared down across council tables, those voices you have drowned out with orders, threats, and carefully measured charity. The Duke of Orleans, for instance, once your most persistent adversary, now dead by your own commission. But where one enemy falls, three more appear, hydra-headed, whispering in corridors, plotting in the shadow of every cathedral spire. Now, as your cough echoes through the stone passageways, they are emboldened. They send spies and messengers disguised as pilgrims, lurking near the city gates to bring back news of your decline. Some are too cautious to celebrate openly, but you know them by their sudden lack of letters and their polite silence when asked about their prayers for your recovery. Even within your own extended family, ambition has a way of blooming in the darkness cast by your fever. Cousins who have always smiled too widely now find excuses to visit less often or not at all. The Duchy of Burgundy, that patchwork of towns and fields you have spent a lifetime holding together with diplomacy, intimidation, and the occasional siege, seems suddenly more fragile than ever. You hear, through the grapevine of anxious servants and anxiouser courtiers, that certain towns in Flanders have already begun rehearsing loyalty to your heir. Merchants speculate about who will rise next. City fathers quietly change which portraits hang in the town halls. There is nothing subtle about the opportunism of your enemies. Word of your illness is treated as both a prophecy and a permission slip. The Dauphin's supporters in Paris grow louder, braver. Armagnac banners appear where once there was only nervous neutrality. French politics is a stew of shifting allegiances and quietly unspoken plans, and nothing brings the ingredients to a boil like a dying duke. You, who once turned rivals against one another with a word, now serve only as a reminder that no one rules forever. Your suffering is, in effect, a public service. It clarifies the ambitions of the living. The household, for all its careful rituals and closed doors, cannot keep the world at bay. Letters arrive, some from allies, full of forced optimism, others from enemies, so effusively polite that you are almost charmed by their malice. They wish you a speedy recovery, a long and prosperous rule, all while sharpening their knives beneath the table. Some dispatch gifts, a fine cloth from a distant city, a barrel of wine, as if to say, "Drink up, John, there is not much time left." You find it oddly touching, this urge to maintain decorum even as they circle like crows. Rumors flow in as quickly as prayers flow out. You are told that the king himself, your own king, now a shadow of a man, has heard of your sickness, and that the court is already speculating about which alliances must be reforged when you are gone. You wonder if anyone will mourn you in Paris, or if the city will simply shrug and find new devils to fear. Of course, not all your enemies rejoice openly. Some, particularly those with more at stake than a title or a few acres of land, are careful to conceal their satisfaction. You picture them pacing in candlelit chambers, anxious for news, eager to know if they can finally emerge from under your shadow. You remember the times you turned their hopes to ashes with a single campaign, the way you forced them to kneel, to beg, to flatter. Now, they have only to wait, and patience is the one virtue they have always understood. You are reminded, in your delirium, of the countless men who have died by your order or your sword. You wonder how many of their widows, their sons, their distant cousins now light candles with prayers of thanks for your suffering. There is a certain logic to this cycle. The death of one man is the fortune of another. Your body, failing slowly, becomes a kind of lottery ticket for every opportunist from Calais to Dijon. Still, you cling to the rituals of command. You insist on dictating letters, making decisions, issuing orders with what little strength you have. You summon advisors, demand reports, bark commands that you can barely finish before coughing overtakes you. In these moments, you see the flicker of hope in their eyes, a hope not for your recovery, but for your permission to move on without you. You grant it, not because you are generous, but because you have always understood the necessity of letting the world keep spinning, even if you are no longer at the center. There is a bitter humor in knowing that your suffering is more useful to your enemies than your health ever was. They do not have to risk rebellion or war or even the expense of a well placed assassin. All they need is time, and time, for once, is firmly on their side. At night, when the fever is at its worst, you imagine the feasts being held in your honor, goblets raised, songs sung, all in celebration of the slow, tedious undoing of John the Fearless. You hope, with the last scrap of pride you possess, that the wine is sour and the songs out of tune. Your enemies rejoice while you suffer. In this, at least, there is a certain fairness. You have always believed in the power of adversity. Now you have become its final, greatest gift. You have always known that your castle, for all its banners and heraldry, is little more than a beautifully decorated box designed to keep the world at bay, a fortress of stone and pride. But nothing, you now realize, keeps out the creeping rot of illness. As your fever lingers and the remedies fail, another enemy reveals itself, the slow, inescapable horror of medieval sanitation. The truth is, for all your titles and armies, you are no cleaner than a pig in its pen, just better dressed and more artfully perfumed. At first, you barely notice. You are too consumed by the aches and chills, the endless parade of doctors and relics, to pay much attention to the simple business of living in your own waste. But as days stretch into weeks, and the illness insists on staying, you cannot ignore the discomfort. The chamber pots, emptied far too rarely, begin to perfume your room with a pungency that no incense can truly hide. Linen, once fresh and crisp, is now permanently damp from sweat and the overzealous washing of your ever hopeful attendants. You are washed, scrubbed, and dabbed at with damp rags, but never for long enough, never well enough. No one dares to admit that the lord of the house smells like a neglected hospital. The floor is strewn with rushes, meant to soak up the worst of it, replaced whenever someone remembers. It turns out, however, that whenever someone remembers is an elastic measure of time, stretching longer the weaker you become. In the early days of your illness, the servants were diligent, eager to display loyalty and industry. Now, with your recovery in doubt, their efforts are tinged with resignation. The rushes are left a day too long, or two, or three. You become acquainted with the delicate aroma of decay, a mixture of old food, stale wine, and the more intimate gifts of a failing body. Personal hygiene is a battlefield where you are losing ground. Bathing is a production involving heated water carried up endless flights of stairs, poured into a wooden tub set before the fire. In better days, you could expect this luxury at least once a fortnight. Now, the mere suggestion of moving you from your sick bed is met with awkward silence and nervous glances. The physicians warn that too much bathing will open the pores and let the sickness in. The priests mutter about humility and suffering. The servants, wisely, say nothing. You itch and sweat and dream of rivers. Wounds and sores, the inevitable companions of prolonged illness, begin to appear. Your skin, once tanned and marked by the sun of many campaigns, grows pallid and mottled. Bed sores bloom where you lie too long on one side. The doctors poke at them with sticks and apply foul smelling poultices. The smell is so persistent it becomes almost comforting, like the background hum of a distant market. It is the music of your undoing. The windows, glazed in uneven glass and covered with heavy curtains, are rarely opened. The risk of a chill, of inviting another bad wind or evil spirit, is judged greater than the benefits of fresh air. So you stew in your own exhalations, in the damp, warm fog of sickness. Sometimes you imagine the room itself is becoming alive, growing soft and wet around you, eager to absorb whatever is left of John the Fearless. The chamber is never truly dark or truly light. Candles burn day and night, casting their flickering, greasy shadows across the walls. The wicks sputter and hiss. The flames sometimes die for no reason, snuffed out by a draft that no one can find or fix. Each time a candle gutter out, someone crosses themselves and mutters that it is a sign, though of what, no one dares say. You begin to realize how quickly dignity evaporates. At first, you resist help. You try to sit, to wash, to maintain the routines of a man in command. It does not last. Soon, you must accept assistance with everything. Your clothes are changed for you. Your hair is brushed by hands that tremble with either pity or fear. The humiliation is constant, made worse by the desperate cheerfulness of those tending to you. They assure you, always, that this is temporary, that you will soon be up and about, issuing commands and fighting wars. Their optimism is like the smell in your chamber, impossible to dispel, impossible to believe. The physicians, undeterred by their failures, now turn to new cures, involving ever more creative applications of mud, leeches, and boiled vegetables. One day, a barber surgeon proposes a poultice of onion and vinegar for your sores. He slaps it on with the enthusiasm of a man fixing a hole in a leaky roof. It stings, it reeks, it does nothing. Your skin continues to rebel, erupting in small volcanoes of pain. Each new attempt at cleanliness is another assault by the forces of filth. There are moments when you long for solitude, for a brief reprieve from the endless ministrations and the stench of your own decline. But privacy is a luxury afforded to the well. You are watched, checked, poked, prodded at night. You lie awake listening to the rats in the walls, to the faint, endless drip of water somewhere in the castle. Even sleep, when it comes, is restless, thick with the smell of your own body and the persistent fear that the filth itself is plotting against you. No one talks openly about death, but the evidence accumulates, the worsening stench, the increasingly raw skin, the servants' faces drawn in lines of distaste and pity. You are no longer a duke, not really, but a patient, something to be managed, avoided, whispered about. The room that once was your command center is now a sick room, and the transformation is as complete as it is irreversible. In the end, you are left with the knowledge that, for all your power, you are as vulnerable as anyone to the relentless advance of filth and decay. The world outside may plot and scheme, but in this room, nothing matters more than the simple, humiliating reality of being alive, and slowly, inexorably becoming less so. You close your eyes, and the darkness smells like sweat, sour wine, and the memory of rivers you will never see again. There is a point in every nobleman's illness when the boundaries between medicine, religion, and outright superstition blur into a single, monotonous routine of hope. You have reached that point. The doctors, having exhausted their arsenal of bloodletting, poultices, and miracle broths, now step aside for the clergy and the old women with their bags of charms. Your sick room becomes a theater of the absurd, in which faith and fear are the principal actors. Every morning, the priests arrive with the sunrise, their faces solemn and puffy with fatigue. They bear relics, prayer books, and endless optimism. You are blessed, anointed, sprinkled with holy water that leaves cold trails on your burning skin. They read prayers in Latin, occasionally glancing at you to see if the syllables have performed their expected magic. You do not have the heart to tell them that their words, if they reach your ears at all, swirl together into a single soothing drone like rain on a stone roof. Sometimes you imagine the saints themselves growing weary of these endless petitions, their hands folded in heaven, eyes rolling politely toward the clouds. The nuns arrive next, dispatched from a nearby convent to tend your body and, if possible, your soul. They sing softly while cleaning your sores and murmuring encouragements that hover between scripture and gossip. One nun insists on pinning a tiny wooden cross to your shirt, as if the fever might be bullied into retreat by a particularly persistent piece of jewelry. Another leaves small slips of parchment under your pillow, each inscribed with a verse meant to ward off evil. You collect these slips with the diligence of a scholar, unable to tell whether they are prayers or recipes. As day blurs into night, the old women, the unofficial healers of every estate, make their entrance. They are relics themselves, wrapped in wool and suspicion, their fingers stained by years of handling roots, bones, and bitter herbs. They speak in dialects even your most erudite counselors struggle to understand. Their advice is rarely sought, but often followed, for in times of despair, no remedy is too strange. One arrives with a pouch of dried lavender and a bundle of twigs, which she waves over your head with a seriousness that brooks no laughter. Another recommends sleeping with a hen's egg under your pillow to draw out the sickness. The egg is still there in the morning, unchanged except for the faint odor it adds to your bedclothes. Your chamber is now a crossroads of faith and folklore. Charms dangle from your bedposts. Iron nails to repel witches, sprigs of rosemary to guard against evil spirits, a clump of hair from a white mare, donated by the stable boy with whispered assurances of its potency. At least twice a day, someone draws a symbol in ashes on your door sometimes a cross, sometimes a circle, sometimes something more elaborate that nobody will explain. You permit it all, less out of belief than exhaustion. Hope, after all, is a stubborn weed. Your wife presides over these rituals with an air of pragmatic resignation. She prays when required, thanks the healers and priests, and manages the schedule of blessings so that no one is offended by overlap. She instructs the kitchen staff to prepare simple foods for the nuns, stronger drinks for the priests, and extra bread for the old women who eat with a relish that suggests their talents are more often paid in rumor than in coin. Sometimes she lingers by your bed after everyone else has left, watching you as if trying to memorize the lines of your face before they fade. Through it all, your own faith flickers. You pray at first, as you were taught, methodically, with words remembered from childhood, addressed to saints whose names once seemed powerful. As the fever persists, your prayers become simpler, more desperate, then fade into muttered bargains with any power that might be listening. You promise to build a church, to forgive an enemy, to feed the poor. In return, you ask only for a moment's peace, a full night's sleep, a morning without pain. The answers, if they come, are always ambiguous. Superstition fills the gaps that faith cannot reach. The staff becomes a nervous congregation, repeating half remembered charms and exchanging stories about neighbors who were cured by drinking rainwater collected at midnight or by swallowing a spider whole. You overhear a chambermaid suggest that tying a red ribbon around your wrist will protect you from the evil eye. The next morning, your wrist is adorned with 3 ribbons, each a different shade, none of them effective. At night, your dreams are crowded with prayers and omens. You see your dead relatives beckoning from across a river, their faces as familiar as your own. You see saints walking the halls of your castle, trailing candlelight and the scent of myrrh. You see crows perched on the battlements, their eyes bright with intelligence, their beaks full of secrets. Sometimes you dream of nothing at all and wake with the sense that you have missed an important message. Even as you are surrounded by faith, you become aware of its limits. The prayers grow longer, the charms more elaborate, but your fever remains unmoved. The rituals continue, less out of conviction than routine. The priests, the nuns, the old women, your wife, the servants, all cling to their little superstitions, their private agreements with fate, because the alternative is to do nothing and wait for the inevitable. In the end, you realize all these rituals are for the living. They are meant to comfort those who will remain when you are gone, to give structure and meaning to the slow, inexorable process of dying. You are a participant in their theater, but you are no longer its audience. You let them pray, let them bless, let them draw their symbols and whisper their hopes into the smoky air. You are too tired to object, and, if you are honest, too tired to care. As the candles gutter and the night grows thick, you listen to the prayers murmured at your bedside, half wishing for a miracle, half content to drift into sleep. Perhaps faith will win the day, or perhaps it will simply keep the darkness at bay a little while longer. Either way, you suspect the difference is mostly academic. When you were younger, fear was a currency you controlled, an invisible thread woven through every order you gave and every bargain you struck. You believed yourself immune to it, wrapped in the armor of your own certainty. But now, as you lie stranded on the unfamiliar shore between fevered sleep and a wakefulness thick with pain, fear becomes your most loyal visitor, never leaving, never offering comfort, merely sitting at the foot of your bed, silent and patient. The hours grow longer and stranger. The world outside your window fades into an indistinct hum. Sometimes you hear church bells ringing for someone else's funeral, sometimes only the scratch of a mouse behind the wainscoting. Time, which once bent obediently around your schedule, now moves in fits and starts, leaping forward in the darkness of a fever dream, then stalling for hours as you count the cracks in the ceiling. With nothing left to do but wait, you discover that your own mind is an inexhaustible source of torment. The regrets come first. They arrive quietly, like unwelcome guests at a feast, each one dressed in memories you would prefer to forget. You remember the faces of men you sent to war, the supplicants you dismissed with a sneer, the children you neglected for the sake of strategy. You recall alliances formed and broken, promises made to secure a moment's advantage. Even your victories seem tainted now that you are forced to lie still and measure your life not in triumphs, but in hours until the next dose of broth. You try to console yourself with the logic of the world as it is, not as it should be. Power demands sacrifices, you remind yourself. A duke cannot afford a conscience, not if he wishes to survive. Yet this rationale, which served you so well when you were strong, offers little comfort now. In the flickering candlelight, your principles reveal themselves for what they are: excuses fashioned from necessity, worn thin with repetition. Fear follows closely behind regret, pressing in around the edges of your thoughts. Not just fear of death, that ancient, patient companion of every mortal, but fear of judgment, of what comes next, if anything comes at all. You recall the teachings of your childhood, the sermons about purgatory, and the endless suffering reserved for those who leave this world with debts unpaid. You begin to wonder how many souls are waiting for you on the other side, how many accounts remain unsettled. You try to pray, but your words falter. The prayers you recite feel heavy and insufficient, the language of duty rather than hope. You promise to repent, to atone, to do better, though you suspect deep down that you will have neither the time nor the strength. Sometimes you dream of confiding in your priest, unburdening your soul in one final act of honesty. But when he sits beside your bed and asks if you have sins to confess, you find yourself shaking your head. Not today, you say. Not yet. You are haunted by visions. In the long, empty hours of the night, your mind conjures ghosts with the ease of a conjurer pulling coins from the air. You see your father, stern and silent, watching as you fail to live up to his impossible standards. You see the enemies you outmaneuvered, returning one by one to take their revenge. You see your mother, her face lined with disappointment, and wonder if she would recognize the man you have become. Even your own children appear in these dreams, their faces blurred by time and distance, their voices full of questions you cannot answer. There are moments when you feel as if you are standing on the threshold of something vast and unknowable. You stare into the darkness, waiting for a sign, a voice, a vision, a sense of peace. Instead, you receive only silence, thick and suffocating. The fear grows sharper, not because you expect punishment, but because you have grown accustomed to having answers. Now, at the edge of everything, you realize how little you know and how little control you truly possess. Your household notices the change. Your wife grows more attentive, sitting longer at your bedside, as if she too senses the battle raging behind your eyes. The priests offer prayers for your soul, more urgent now, their eyes flickering with the recognition that their rituals are as much for the living as for the dying. Even the servants move more quietly, their voices subdued, as if afraid of disturbing the shadows gathering in your chamber. You begin to understand why old men confess their sins on their deathbeds, why they grasp at forgiveness as if it were a piece of driftwood in a storm. It is not just the fear of hell that drives them, but the desperate need to make sense of lives spent chasing things that dissolve so easily: power, respect, security. In the end, all that is left is the hope that someone, somewhere, will remember you with kindness, or at least with understanding. You try to remember the moments of mercy you offered, the hands you held, the lives you changed for the better. There are a few, buried deep among the more vivid memories of anger and ambition. You cling to these small acts of decency, hoping they will balance the scales, if only a little. As dawn creeps through the curtains and the prayers resume, you lie quietly, a battlefield of fear and regret. You are John the Fearless, but your courage was always for the visible, the nameable, the foes that carried banners and blades. No one ever warned you that the worst enemies are the ones you carry with you, waiting for the moment when you are too tired, too sick to fight back. You used to imagine that illness was a sort of siege, a temporary, if miserable, encampment around the citadel of your body, with every day a skirmish and every night a chance to rally your defenses. But now, as the fever sharpens and your body grows heavier, you realize this was wishful thinking. This is not a siege. This is a slow and methodical occupation, the enemy spreading room by room, muscle by muscle, until nothing is left unconquered. The fever becomes your atmosphere, the air itself warm and thick and hostile. You sweat through your sheets, through your tunic, through the very skin you once wore so easily. Every inch of cloth sticks to you like a second punishment, heavy and wet, and the dampness chills you even as your cheeks burn. The physicians cluster around your bed, their optimism noticeably dimmer, their whispered conferences a little more urgent. They debate whether the sickness is progressing faster or deeper, as if such distinctions matter to the man drowning in his own body. Your hands shake constantly now. You can no longer sign your name without smudging the ink or dropping the pen. Your signature, once the mark of authority and threat, now looks as if it was written by a trembling child. You begin to dictate your letters instead, your voice sometimes steady, more often cracked and raw. The servants write quickly, nervous to finish before you drift into another coughing fit or lapse into one of the long, empty silences that now fill your days. Sleep offers no relief. When you do manage to slip into unconsciousness, it is a fevered, tattered sleep, haunted by strange and vivid dreams. In one, you are running through a forest, chased by a pack of hounds with the faces of your rivals. In another, you are standing on the battlements of your own castle, watching as an invisible army storms the gates. You wake to find yourself gasping for breath, heart pounding as if you have truly been running for your life. Sometimes you wake not knowing where you are at all. The shadows in your chamber lengthen and shift, becoming strange shapes that you cannot name. Candles flicker and gutter, casting monstrous silhouettes on the walls. You mistake the face of your wife for your mother's, the gentle hand of a servant for a child's. Everything is thick with confusion, a fog that settles over your thoughts and does not lift. On your better days, you know this is the fever playing tricks. On the worse ones, you are not so sure. Your body becomes an unreliable ally. The aches intensify, radiating from your chest to your joints, down your back and into your legs. Each cough is a small explosion, rattling your bones and leaving you dizzy. Sometimes, after a particularly violent fit, you find blood on your handkerchief, bright and shocking against the linen. The physicians frown at this, as if they hoped not to see such signs, but they do not offer comfort or explanation. They prescribe more broths, more compresses, more bloodletting. Their faces say what their words will not. They are out of ideas. Your skin erupts in angry patches. Sores bloom on your arms and legs, angry red circles that sting and itch and bleed. The doctors dab at them with vinegars and ointments, muttering about bad humors and malignant airs. You wonder if you are becoming a lesson in anatomy for future physicians, a living catalog of symptoms and failures. The household grows even more cautious. Voices in the hall drop to a hush as you approach. Your children are ushered in and out of your room like nervous envoys, their faces set in careful masks of bravery. Your wife's gaze lingers longer on your face, her lips pressed into a thin line that suggests prayer or resignation, or both. The servants' hands tremble as they change your linens, as if afraid the sickness might leap from your body to theirs with a touch. Sometimes, in the small hours of the night, you become convinced that the room itself is shrinking. The walls press in, heavy and damp, and the ceiling sags overhead. You lie awake, listening to the sounds of your own labored breath, the slow drip of water somewhere in the castle, the far-off creak of a door that will not close. There is a smell in the air, sour and metallic, that you now recognize as your own decline. The priests and nuns increase their visits, as if holiness itself might overwhelm the fever by sheer persistence. They offer you the sacraments, the prayers, the holy water, always with the gentlest touch and the quietest voices. You thank them because it seems the polite thing to do, but you are no longer convinced that God is taking sides. When the physicians propose another round of bloodletting, you agree without protest. You are too tired to object, too tired to pretend hope. The cut is deeper this time, the blood slower, more reluctant to leave you. You watch it fill the bowl, darker than before, and wonder if this is how you will measure the time you have left, not in days or hours, but in pints surrendered to the cure. As the illness intensifies, your world contracts. The horizon is the edge of your bed. The future is the next bowl of broth, the next rag wiped across your brow, the next whisper from a doctor or a priest. You realize, in a rare moment of clarity, that you are no longer living for recovery, but for small mercies. A quiet hour, an easy breath, the touch of a hand that does not flinch. And through it all, the fever burns, relentless and impartial, unconcerned with your rank or your history or the prayers muttered on your behalf. You are John the Fearless, Duke of Burgundy, and you are losing to an enemy you cannot name in a battle with no terms but surrender. It is a peculiar sensation, composing your own farewell while you are still, in some technical sense, alive. You have issued countless commands in your life, orders for war, judgments in disputes, allocations of land and wealth, but this is the first decree that feels both inevitable and almost absurd. You are, after all, John the Fearless, who once imagined death could always be postponed with a clever treaty or the right bribe. Now you understand that the only negotiation left is with your own mortality, and that the terms have already been decided. The household seems to know, even before you voice it. There is a new hush in the halls, an anticipation thick as incense. Your wife's steps grow softer, your children's laughter is more guarded. The courtiers wait for the signal that the end game has begun. Even the servants, who used to clatter through the corridors with dishes and buckets, now move with the delicacy of mourners. You summon the notary, a man whose face you recognize from previous, less consequential business. He arrives, ink-stained and breathless, clutching a sheaf of parchment and an array of seals. There is a ceremony to the act, but no joy. The notary bows, arranges his tools on a small table by your bed, and waits for you to speak. You try to sit straighter, to muster the presence of the Duke you once were, but your body protests. The pillows are rearranged, the covers smoothed, and you begin. Your voice, which once filled council chambers and made enemies tremble, is now a hoarse whisper. Each sentence costs you. The words come out in bursts, punctuated by coughing and long silences. The notary's quill scratches across the parchment, translating your faded authority into a legacy. You name your heir, instructing that your son should inherit Burgundy and all its tangled obligations. You outline dowries, stipends, and gifts, careful to mention each daughter, each loyal servant, each cousin whose ambitions must be soothed. There are requests for masses to be said for your soul, for your father's soul, for the souls of those lost in your service. You allocate funds to the church in the hope, however faint, that such gestures may tip the scales at the last moment. You order debts settled, disputes closed, enemies forgiven, or at least ignored. The list grows longer with every memory that surfaces, every regret that whispers for attention. Your wife is present, listening intently, her face a mask of composure. She knows the significance of every bequest, every omission. Each phrase is a message to those who will survive you, a final assertion of power and a delicate attempt at peace. You notice through a fog of fatigue how carefully she marks your tone, how her fingers tighten on her rosary at certain names. This, too, is a battle, one last campaign waged with ink instead of iron. Your children are brought in, one by one, to receive your blessing. You try to offer wisdom, to cloak your farewells in advice. Be just, you tell your son, though you know that justice is as fragile as a spider's web in the wind. Be merciful, you urge your daughters, though mercy has rarely been a currency in your own life. You want to say more, to confess, to ask forgiveness, but the words stick. There is too much and not enough time. The notary reads your words back to you, voice steady and impersonal. You listen, checking each line for errors or for truths you wish you could retract. The legal phrases pile up, heavy and final. I, John, by the grace of God, Duke of Burgundy, being of sound mind, do make this my last will and testament. The formalities are followed, the seals applied, the witnesses called. You press your trembling hand to the parchment, making your mark, a signature that looks nothing like the one you once wielded as a weapon. Afterward, there is a strange sense of completion, part relief, part hollowness. The will is placed in a locked chest, guarded as fiercely as any fortress. Your family gathers, the servants hover, and you are left to wonder what difference any of it will make. The future is now someone else's problem, though you have spent your entire life trying to control it. You spend the evening giving further instructions, smaller things that will never be written in any document. You tell the steward to care for the old hounds in the kennels, to grant an extra loaf of bread to the kitchen staff when you are gone. You ask your confessor to pray not only for you, but for those who have loved you, and for those who have suffered because of you. You ask your wife to remember you kindly, though you suspect she already has a private box for her grief, to be opened only when the last candle has burned out. Night falls, and with it a strange peace. The tasks of power have been set aside, the burdens handed off, the legacy secured as best it can be. You are exhausted, but your mind is clearer than it has been in weeks. For the first time, you allow yourself to imagine a world without you in it, a world that will, inevitably, carry on. You close your eyes and listen to the scratch of the notary's quill as he finishes the final copy. In the distance, church bells toll, not for you, at least not yet, but for the ordinary business of life and death. You wonder what the bells will sound like when they finally ring for John the Fearless, and whether anyone will remember the man behind the title or only the list of demands he left behind. You drift into sleep with the strange, comforting knowledge that you have done what you can, that the future will now unfold in its own indifferent way. The world waits for no one, not even for dukes. You once imagined that dying would be dramatic, a battle perhaps, or a storm, or at the very least a final surge of meaning to cap off a life spent in pursuit of significance. But dying, you now discover, is mostly waiting. Waiting for doctors, waiting for priests, waiting for pain, waiting for relief that never quite arrives. Above all, waiting for the end, which seems perpetually delayed by the tedium of your own decline. Your sick room, which has been a theater for every possible variety of hope and fear, now falls into a long and stifling silence. The parade of visitors has dwindled to a trickle. The relics have been stowed away, the prayers have grown quieter, and even the doctors now visit out of obligation rather than optimism. They look in on you, check your pulse with a sigh, and discuss your condition in the hallway in tones that sound almost bored. After all, a slow death is no spectacle, no matter how noble the patient. Your family's patience, like your body, is wearing thin. Your wife sits by your bed, rosary in hand, lips moving silently in prayer. Every so often, she glances at you, not with hope or fear, but with the resignation of someone waiting for a ship that has already missed the tide. Your children appear, on occasion, standing awkwardly at the foot of the bed. Their expressions are careful, as if they are actors unsure of their lines. They say the right words, then retreat to their own affairs. You cannot blame them. There is only so much of this that anyone can bear. The servants have become expert at managing the day-to-day monotony of dying. Meals arrive and are cleared away, mostly untouched. Linens are changed, water is brought, candles are replaced. These small rituals, once meant to comfort, have become rote, habits performed to fill the space between breaths. You watch the faces of those around you and see not concern, but distraction. The headmaid wonders if she will be dismissed by your successor. The steward mentally reviews his ledgers as he inquires after your comfort. Everyone, in their own way, is waiting. The world outside your window continues, indifferent. You hear the sounds of the city, the distant clang of the blacksmith, the occasional call of a market seller, the laughter of children at play. Life carries on without you, each day a replica of the last. You remember dimly a time when you could not imagine a world that did not revolve around your will. Now you see how easily it turns, how smoothly it slips into routine, even as you drift toward your own conclusion. Even the passage of time has become a blur. The hours crawl, yet days seem to vanish, each one indistinguishable from the next. You try to mark time by the position of the sun, the arrival of meals, the changing of the guard at your door, but it all dissolves into sameness: gray dawns, gray afternoons, gray evenings. The monotony is punctuated only by the occasional spike of pain, a reminder that your body still has some small tricks left to play. Your mind, starved for distraction, latches onto trivial details. You count the cracks in the ceiling, the knots in the wood of the bed frame, the number of steps it takes the servant to cross your room. You trace patterns in the worn fabric of your blankets. Imagine faces in the swirling grain of the floorboards. These small obsessions become your companions, a way to keep yourself from sliding into the deeper, darker boredom of simply waiting for nothing. Sometimes, in rare lucid moments, you wonder what your household says about you when they think you cannot hear. You suspect your decline is discussed with the same detachment as the weather or the price of bread. The Duke has taken no broth today. The Duke's fever is higher. The Duke slept through the afternoon. These observations are not cruel, but they are not tender either. You have become another duty, another fact to be managed until it no longer requires attention. You are not alone in your waiting. Everyone else is waiting too. Some for your death, some for their own release from duty, some simply for the next change, any change at all. The castle is a hive of anticipation, muted and listless. The only person who seems genuinely engaged is your priest, who continues to pray with the intensity of a man determined to outlast you. You are half amused, half irritated by his persistence. If salvation could be earned by repetition, your place in heaven would be assured. You realize, with a kind of grim humor, that even the most powerful life ends in this way, not in a blaze of glory, but in a slow unraveling of interest. The story of John the Fearless, so full of action and ambition, now dwindles to a quiet, prolonged pause. You are, in your last days, a spectator in your own life, a man surrounded by people whose attention is elsewhere. The waiting continues, as relentless as the illness itself. You grow weaker, the world grows duller, and the line between one day and the next becomes impossible to find. At some point, you stop waiting for the end and simply wait. It is, in its way, almost peaceful, almost. Waiting, you once thought, was the hardest part. You were wrong. There comes a stage in every long illness when pain grows so persistent that time itself seems to fold around it, shrinking the world to the cramped circle of your own body. All the dignified boredom, all the gray monotony, suddenly erupts into something much sharper and far more personal. The disease, having tested your patience, now decides to test your endurance. The pain announces itself without fanfare, as if it has always been waiting for you to notice. It is not the dull ache of old wounds or the manageable throb of fever. It is something larger, angrier, and much more ambitious. It begins in your chest, a tightness that makes every breath a negotiation, then radiates outward, fingers, arms, spine, until there is no safe place left. Your joints burn as if doused in vinegar. Your muscles twist with cramps, and your head throbs in time with your failing pulse. Every cough rattles through your body like a siege ram. Each one leaves you weaker, gasping for air, the taste of iron in your mouth, a warning and a promise. The doctors, now little more than spectators, hover in the doorway, trading useless observations. They try a final round of potions and compresses, but you can see in their eyes that they have already surrendered. Your body is no longer a patient. It is a lesson in failure, a demonstration of all the things that cannot be cured by faith or hope or medical theory. The nights are the worst. Darkness amplifies the pain, stretches it out, makes it a landscape you must cross alone. Sometimes the fever returns with such force that you hallucinate. The faces at your bedside twist and blur. Shadows become menacing. Familiar voices sound distant and strange. You call out for people who are not there, answer questions no one has asked. In these hours, you learn that agony is both a physical and a spiritual affair. Your body is racked with spasms, your mind with fears. Time loses meaning. Pain is the only measure. Your body rebels in other ways too. The sores that marked your skin now deepen, becoming wounds that leak and refuse to heal. Every movement is agony, every touch a fresh torment. Your hands, once so steady, now flutter helplessly at your sides. The simplest acts, swallowing, speaking, shifting in bed, become daunting tasks, each one demanding a courage you are not sure you still possess. You wonder how something as ordinary as lying still can hurt so much. The people around you change in subtle ways. Your family, exhausted by grief and helplessness, begin to drift away during the worst of your fits. The servants become more mechanical, their pity now tempered by dread. The priest alone remains steadfast, his prayers growing louder as your own voice grows softer. He tells you to think of Christ's suffering, to unite your pain with his. You do not tell him what you are really thinking, that even martyrdom loses its glamour after the first few nights of blinding agony. Your senses betray you. The room, already thick with the odors of sickness and stale air, now feels suffocating. Every noise, the scrape of a chair, the creak of the door, the whisper of a prayer, grates on your nerves. Light becomes a knife, shadow a torment. You close your eyes, but the darkness offers no relief, only new forms of pain, pulsing, throbbing, unending time fractures. The world shrinks to a series of sensations: fire in your limbs, ice in your bones, sandpaper in your throat. Occasionally, a brief, blessed numbness descends, but it never lasts. Each return to awareness is worse than the last, because now you know exactly what you are returning to. Your pride, which survives so many other indignities, falters. You find yourself pleading, not for life, but for respite. You beg for water, for sleep, for the pain to stop, even for death itself. Your dignity, once guarded so fiercely, slips away. You do not care who sees your weakness. You want only an end. The physicians finally cease their experiments. The last of the ointments are set aside. They recommend only comfort measures now: soft cloths for your skin, weak wine to dull the pain, cold water for your burning forehead. No one pretends that recovery is possible. The conversations in your room become quieter, more practical, as if your death is an appointment penciled in for some not so distant morning. Agony, you discover, is its own universe. It isolates you more completely than any quarrel, any exile, any loss of power. You are alone, even as people bustle around your bed, even as prayers are spoken, even as hands reach for yours. Your kingdom has shrunk to the battlefield of your body, and you are losing ground with every hour. At last, when the pain peaks and you are sure you cannot bear it another moment, something inside you gives way. You stop fighting. There is a strange peace in surrender, a release from the exhausting work of resisting what cannot be resisted. The pain does not leave, but it changes. It becomes background, less personal, part of the world's indifferent machinery. You float above it, detached, observing rather than suffering. But the world remains, and so does your body, stubbornly hanging on. You wait, and you endure, and you wonder how much longer this can last. You, who feared nothing and no one, now find yourself afraid of only one thing, that there is no end, only more pain, only more waiting, only more nights. And yet, even this is bearable. For now, there is a certain point, difficult to pinpoint, but unmistakable, when the nature of your waiting changes. The pain, relentless and draining, settles into a kind of background hum. Your world contracts still further, down to the narrow boundaries of your bed, the blurred faces of those who remain, and the dim halo of candlelight that flickers against the walls like the memory of something once fierce. You sense that the end is close. It is not a visitation, not a thunderclap or a sudden collapse, but the slow realization that you are slipping out of the story, page by page, breath by shallow breath. On this day, the room is quieter than usual. The air itself seems to pause, thick with a reverence that even your titles never commanded. The castle, always noisy with business and intrigue, moves in slow motion, as if everyone is holding their breath. The news has spread. John the Fearless, who outlived assassins, armies, and his own ambitions, is down to his final battle. You would laugh, if you had the strength, at how many hoped your death would be more dramatic, less ordinary. You are aware, dimly, of the people gathered around you. Your wife sits at your side, her hands folded tightly together, knuckles white. Her lips move in silent prayer, her eyes fixed on your face, as if determined not to miss the moment your spirit slips away. Your children stand a little further back, nervous and uncertain, faces pale in the candlelight. The priest murmurs prayers for the dying, words that seem both impossibly ancient and entirely beside the point. For a moment, you envy his certainty. It must be comforting, you think, to know what comes next. Servants drift in and out, carrying bowls of water, fresh cloths, and the last dregs of medicine. They have long since stopped believing it will help, but habit is a stubborn force. Some avoid your gaze, as if afraid your dying might be contagious. Others look at you with a sort of sad curiosity, as if memorizing your features for stories they will tell after you are gone. There is a peculiar clarity in these last hours. The room, so often clouded by fever and pain, seems sharper, more real. Every sound stands out: the rustle of fabric, the creak of the floor, the sizzle of a dying candle. You notice the color of your wife's dress, the pattern of your daughter's braid, the trembling in your youngest son's hands. You see your life not as a series of great victories and bitter losses, but as a collection of these tiny human moments. You are surprised by how much they matter to you now, when so little else does. Your mind drifts, not to the grand halls of power or the fields of battle, but to the memory of early mornings in the countryside, dew on grass, the call of distant birds, the laughter of siblings long dead. You remember the sensation of cold water on your face after a summer storm, the smell of new bread, the ache of muscles well used. You wonder, with a quiet amusement, why none of your glories and achievements feel half as real as these simple things. You try to speak, to give some final advice, some blessing or confession. Your voice is little more than a whisper, words slurred by exhaustion and pain. Still, your family leans in, eager for anything you have left to offer. You tell your wife she was braver than you deserved, your children that they must care for one another. You try to apologize for the burdens you placed upon them. You try, as always, to control the outcome, to shape the narrative. But the story, you realize, is already moving on without you. The priest offers the last rites. Holy water is sprinkled on your forehead, oil is dabbed on your lips. He recites prayers for the safe passage of your soul. The words drift over you, comforting and strange, ancient and irrelevant. You close your eyes and focus on the warmth of your wife's hand in yours, the sound of your children breathing, the faint echo of footsteps as servants retreat into the corridor. Outside, the day fades. You sense the change in the air, the softening of the light, the cool promise of night. Somewhere in the distance, bells ring, perhaps for you, perhaps for someone else. It no longer matters. You are strangely at peace, not because you have solved the riddle of your life, but because you have finally surrendered the need to. Your thoughts grow slower, quieter. You drift between waking and sleep, the boundaries between memory and dream growing thin. Sometimes you are a child again, running through fields without pain. Sometimes you are a shadow in a long procession, one among many, neither first nor last. There is no revelation, no sudden vision, no voice from the heavens, only a growing stillness, a sense that the struggle is done. You feel your breath growing shallower, your heart working less and less hard. The faces around you blur, the room itself growing distant. You realize, in a final moment of clarity, that this is what everyone who has ever lived has faced: the letting go, the gentle falling away from the world. As you slip from one moment to the next, you find yourself thinking not of what you leave behind, but of what you carry with you: the warmth of hands as it held, the sound of laughter, the feel of the sun on your face. It is enough, more than enough. The room holds its breath. You release yours. It is said that great men die great deaths, but your death, when it comes, is neither great nor unexpected. There is no dramatic gasp, no sudden, heroic effort to cling to life, no prophecy fulfilled, no last minute revelation. The last breath you exhale is soft, almost unremarkable, less a final cry than a quiet punctuation at the end of a very long, overwritten sentence. The candle gutters out. The priest stops his prayers. Your family leans in, and then nothing. The world tilts, shrugs, and continues its indifferent spin. The first to notice is your wife, whose hand has remained in yours long after your grip slackened. She waits, breath held, eyes searching your face for some sign of return, a twitch, a word, a miracle. None comes. After a moment, she nods, as if agreeing with an opponent in a debate that lasted far too long. The priest, already prepared for this moment, intones the final blessings with mechanical certainty, his words echoing in the sudden, awkward quiet. Your children cry, quietly, and more from shock than true grief, their eyes wide as they see death up close and find it much duller than the stories promised. The news spreads quickly, but not with panic or even urgency. There are no bells rung in alarm, no messengers dispatched in haste. Instead, the information is relayed through the castle with the weary professionalism of staff accustomed to loss. The Duke has passed. It is a phrase that feels more like a bureaucratic update than an epical event. The Chamberlain begins a list of tasks to be completed. The Chief Steward gives orders to draw the curtains, to cover the mirrors, to extinguish the unnecessary candles. The servants set about their work with a kind of somber relief. After weeks of hovering, guessing, and waiting, they finally know what comes next. You are, for a moment, the center of everything again. People file into your chamber, not to mourn, but to confirm. The notary arrives with your will, now an artifact of immediate relevance. Advisors whisper among themselves, checking the lines of succession, rehearsing which loyalties will be declared at tomorrow's gathering. Already, eyes are turning from your still form to the new center of gravity, your heir, your widow, the possibilities of a court in transition. There are tears, of course, but they are careful, measured things. Your wife allows herself a moment to weep, private, dignified, brief. The children are guided away, comforted by relatives who speak in platitudes about bravery, peace, God's will. The priest stays a little longer, reciting prayers for your soul, but his mind is already wandering toward the next crisis, the next dying man in need of spiritual reassurance. The household reacts less with sorrow than with a release of long held tension. The servants exhale, some crossing themselves, others exchanging glances that mix sympathy with practical curiosity. The cook wonders who will order the kitchens now. The gardener considers which flowers will be needed for the funeral. Life, it turns out, is not a tapestry, but a tightly woven net of routines, stretched but never broken by the absence of any one man, no matter how important he was yesterday. Even your enemies, who receive the news by whisper and rumor, do not bother with shock. There are no gasps in Paris, no dark clouds gathering over the chanceries of Europe. Instead, there is a quiet nod of recognition, a mental shifting of alliances, a discreet celebration in a few shadowed halls, the opening of new conversations, and old wounds. Your death is not a surprise, not a disaster, not even a relief, really. It is simply another turn of the wheel. You are not there to see it, but the world you leave behind is already moving on. The courtier with the best handwriting drafts the formal announcements. Messengers are dispatched, not in haste, but in well timed, carefully staged journeys to ensure the right people are told in the right order. The old retainers gather in corners, swapping stories about your younger days with the safe nostalgia of men whose own relevance is suddenly in question. No one is unkind, exactly. Even your critics speak softly, recalling not your faults, but your inevitabilities, the temper, the stubbornness, the endless need to command. For a few days, your memory is everywhere, in every conversation, in every plan. Then gradually, it begins to recede, like a tide going out, leaving behind only what could not be carried forward. Your body, meanwhile, is tended to with a blend of reverence and practicality. The women of the household wash your limbs, close your eyes, dress you in the ceremonial clothes prepared for just this occasion. You are laid out in state, as if still presiding over the affairs of your house, though now you command only silence. The candles burn low, the incense curls upward, and the door is kept open for visitors who come, not to see you, but to be seen seeing you. Death, in the end, surprises no one. Not you, not your family, not your rivals, not the servants or the peasants or the priests. It is as if everyone was rehearsing for this moment all along, as if your entire decline was merely a preparation for this quiet, undramatic ending. The world is not changed, it is merely adjusted, slightly, as it always is when a great name becomes only a name, when a voice becomes only an echo. Outside your window, the sun rises as usual, the city stirs, the castle resumes its routines. No banners are lowered, no statues are toppled. The story of John the Fearless ends as so many others do, not with a bang, but with a sigh. And in the great ledger of history, another line is drawn through a name, and life, indifferent, relentless, goes on. Death for the living is never simply an ending. It is above all a new and complicated task, a project to be completed before memory fades or practical concerns take over entirely. Your body, no longer you but a problem to be solved, is entrusted to hands that move with equal measures of reverence, efficiency, and faintly suppressed impatience. There are rituals to observe, protocols to follow, a timetable to maintain. You are not the first duke to die, and you certainly will not be the last. The women of the household, led by your wife and her closest confidants, take charge. There is a solemn choreography to the proceedings, perfected over generations of noble deaths. First, the windows are opened briefly to let out your departing soul, or perhaps only to freshen the air. The candles are snuffed, then relit. Heavy curtains are drawn across the bed. Everyone speaks in whispers, as if afraid the dead might overhear the living and take offense at any break with custom. The bath water is brought in, steaming in the early morning chill. Your body, once a symbol of command and action, is handled with the careful detachment usually reserved for delicate relics or untested poisons. Your limbs are washed, the traces of sweat, blood, and final indignities gently removed. The servants work quietly, their faces composed, their thoughts elsewhere, perhaps remembering the times you barked an order or offered a rare smile, or perhaps simply considering the new routines to come. There is a particular awkwardness to the task. You are heavier than you look, as all dead men are, and awkward to lift. Your skin is cool and mottled, your muscles stiffening by the minute. The maids and attendants make small talk under their breath, discussing the thickness of the linen shroud, the fit of the ceremonial tunic, the cost of imported soap. Death, it turns out, is expensive, even for a body that no longer cares. Your hair is combed, your nails are trimmed. The priest arrives, muttering prayers and sprinkling holy water with a distracted hand. He checks the room for the proper symbols: crucifix above the head, candles at the feet, a bowl of salt on the table. Everything is as it should be. If anyone remembers the person you were, it is not mentioned. Here, you are a body in need of proper handling, a vessel to be escorted from one world to the next with as little fuss as possible. Your burial garments are brought out: fine linen, velvet, gold threaded vestments stitched years ago for just this moment. You are dressed like a duke for the last time, although your audience is reduced to a handful of servants and a silent, weeping wife. There is no armor, no point in preparing for battles you will not fight. Instead, a rosary is placed in your hands, and your signet ring is pressed onto a finger that will never again seal an order or a threat. The chamber is transformed. Flowers are arranged on every surface, not so much to honor you as to fight the inevitable work of time. The scent of lilies and rosemary, strong and sweet, mingles with the fainter undertones of wax and soap. Drapes are drawn tight, casting the room in a soft, perpetual twilight. Visitors are allowed to enter, one at a time, to pay their respects, not to you exactly, but to the position you once occupied. There is a strict order to the farewells. Your closest family kneels first, heads bowed in silent prayer. Old retainers linger at the doorway, hats in hand, their grief measured and dignified. Some servants cross themselves, others simply watch, faces unreadable. Your children are ushered in, their eyes wide and uncertain. Your youngest weeps openly. Your eldest stands stiff and pale, already rehearsing the role you have left vacant. The priest begins the official prayers for the dead, reading from a battered book with the steady rhythm of a man who has performed this ritual too many times to count. His words wash over the room, sanctifying, soothing, filling the silence with a sense of order. For a moment, you are the center of the world again, not as a force, but as an absence. Preparation for burial is never without its practical concerns. The coffin, built years ago by skilled hands, is checked and polished, lined with silk and cushions for a comfort you will not feel. The grave diggers are summoned. The route to the family crypt is swept and cleared. There are arguments, quiet, careful ones, about the order of the funeral procession, the choice of pallbearers, the exact wording on the stone. Death does not erase hierarchy, it only shuffles the ranks. When all is ready, you are placed gently in your coffin. The lid is left open for a time, so that those who must see you one last time may do so. The resemblance to the Duke they remember is already fading. The lines of pain have been smoothed by the indifferent hand of death, the weight of power replaced by the stillness of surrender. The ring is pressed into your hand, the rosary tucked between your fingers, a final armor against the unknown. As the day wears on, the procession gathers outside your chamber. Courtiers, clergy, servants, family, all in their appointed places. You, immobile at last, are carried through halls that once echoed with your commands. Some avert their eyes, others steal a final glance, as if searching for a hint of the man you were beneath the formal trappings of death. Outside, the sky is heavy and indifferent. The world, which paused for only a moment at your passing, resumes its measured pace. Inside, the rites continue, each step part of a well rehearsed liturgy that transforms a body into a memory, a duke into a name, a life into a ritual. You are ready, or as ready as anyone ever is, for the journey to come, a journey in which your role is the simplest and most final, to be carried, to be mourned, to be left behind. In life, your every movement set off a flurry of activity, greetings rehearsed, doors thrown open, courtiers snapping to attention, servants running ahead to announce your presence. In death, the choreography is grander still, but curiously empty. The funeral of a duke is a ritual performed for the living, a spectacle staged by survivors to reassure themselves that hierarchy endures even as its cast changes. You are in this final act, both centerpiece and afterthought, the honored guest who is present only in the most literal sense. The procession gathers in the great hall, echoing with the heavy silence of anticipation. Family, dignitaries, retainers, priests, all costumed in the funereal, black and somber velvet, reserved for just such occasions. There are rules, and then everyone follows them, or at least pretends to. The noblest stand closest to your coffin, the lesser lords arranged behind them, the servants lining the edges of the room like living shadows. Your widow stands at the front, face veiled, posture immaculate, supported on either side by children and advisors who look as though they are attending a play they did not audition for. The clergy lead the way, swinging censers that fill the air with a haze of incense, sweet and sickly, designed to mask the more unpleasant reminders that this is not merely ceremony, but the disposal of a body in decline. The priest recites prayers with practiced gravity, his voice booming in the cavernous space, words bouncing off stone and stained glass. His Latin is impeccable, but his eyes drift to the assembled nobility, careful to gauge the mood, ready to adjust the length of the service if restlessness threatens decorum. Your coffin is carried on the shoulders of carefully selected men, strong, loyal, photogenic in a medieval way. They move slowly, not just out of respect, but because haste is unseemly, and because the route from hall to chapel has been strewn with rushes, flowers, and the expectations of an attentive audience. And at every doorway the bearers pause, as if daring the world to blink first. The bystanders bow their heads, some with genuine feeling, most with the mechanical precision of people who have attended too many such affairs. The music, provided by the household choir and a few imported specialists, is beautiful, mournful, and completely uninspired. It is music for a pageant, not a person. Notes chosen to blend with the smell of wax and the dull thud of boots on stone. Every verse is a promise of eternal life, of peace, of memory preserved in some golden ledger. But to your ears, could you still hear them, it would sound like a list of obligations being ticked off in order. There are speeches, too. The priest, the steward, a favored advisor, each offers a few words about your courage, your wisdom, your piety. The tone is respectful, but carefully noncommittal, hedged against the unpredictable judgments of posterity. No one mentions the scandals, the feuds, the nights of indecision, or the days of reckless ambition. No one recalls the look in your eyes when you realized too late that some victories are indistinguishable from defeat. The portrait painted is flattering, if a little vague. You are mourned as an institution, not as a man. The guests do their part. The oldest weep with careful restraint, dabbing at their eyes with embroidered handkerchiefs. The youngest try not to fidget. The ambitious watch the proceedings with keen, calculating eyes, already cataloging the shifting alliances and opportunities that your passing creates. Some murmur that the arrangements are lavish. Others grumble that the wine is not as good as last year's. For most, the funeral is an obligation, a necessary chapter in the endless, repetitive book of courtly life. The servants and villagers fill the back of the chapel, pressed together in uneasy solidarity. They are quiet, respectful, but not especially sad. To them, the death of a duke is a matter of distant consequence, a change in the name above the gate, perhaps a shift in the quality of bread or the discipline of the guards. They will say prayers, light candles, and then return to their own more pressing routines. Outside, the weather is suitably grim. Clouds hang low, and a thin rain spatters the cloaks and banners. The chill keeps the crowd subdued, coats the entire event in a layer of practical discomfort that ensures no one lingers longer than required. The burial itself is a private affair. The coffin is lowered into the family crypt, surrounded by a handful of closest kin and clerics. Prayers are offered, earth is scattered, and a final benediction is pronounced. There are no outbursts, no dramatic farewells. The ceremony is, above all, an act of closure for them, not for you. The crowd disperses with a kind of relieved efficiency. Some head to the kitchens for food and drink, others to private rooms for whispered conversations. The castle staff set about cleaning up, folding the drapes, clearing the flowers, scrubbing away the last signs that anything of importance has happened here at all. The tapestries are straightened, the chairs return to their places, and life, like a river finding its channel, resumes its ordinary course. You, now entombed in stone and memory, are left to the slow work of legend making. For a time, your name will be spoken in the halls, your deeds recalled, your faults politely ignored. The rituals of mourning give way quickly to the rituals of succession, of administration, of survival. Your widow retires to her chambers. Your children step awkwardly into their new roles. Your rivals recalibrate their strategies. You are no longer a person, but a problem solved, a story completed, a lesson filed away for the next generation to misunderstand. In the end, your funeral is everything it was meant to be: grand, somber, impressively forgettable. A rite performed not for you, but for those you have left behind. A final affirmation that, in death as in life, form matters more than feeling. The world turns, the page turns, the story, already slipping away, becomes history. The world is always eager to move on. No sooner has the last hymn faded in the chapel and the last guest left the funeral feast than your memory begins its own slow transformation, first whispered, then measured, then finally catalogued. You are no longer John the fearless, the living, breathing, contradictory Duke, but a subject, an anecdote, a piece of history that others are free to revise, repurpose, and misunderstand at their leisure. At first, your name is on everyone's lips. In the weeks following your burial, servants trade stories about your temper and your appetite, about the time you surprised the kitchen by demanding a midnight roast, or the day you punished a careless groom for saddling your horse improperly. Your children mention you in every conversation, sometimes with genuine longing, sometimes as a shield in family arguments. Father would have wanted this. Your wife, dressed in black and enveloped by protocol, speaks of you to visitors with a composure so perfect it cannot be entirely sincere. Priests remember you in their prayers. Court advisors invoke your legacy whenever it suits their agendas, and the townspeople use your name as a unit of time since the Duke died, back when the old Duke was still alive. But memories, like mourning, fade faster than most would like to admit. Life presses forward with an urgency you never quite appreciated in your own days. The court busies itself with the new Duke and the intricate business of succession. Policy must be argued, coin collected, alliances renewed. In the castle, rooms you once haunted are swept clean, banners are changed, portraits are quietly moved from pride of place to somewhere less conspicuous. Your heirs, eager not to be defined by your shadow, begin to make decisions that would have horrified or delighted you had you the strength to care. And yet, some things persist. Your mistakes, in particular, prove durable. In the taverns and markets, you are remembered for your temper, your stubbornness, the time you had a rival's man flogged in the square for insolence. Old soldiers recall your campaigns with a mixture of pride and bitterness. Your enemies, now suddenly philosophical, muse aloud about whether you were ever truly brave or simply reckless. Some say you were a tyrant, others insist you were the last bulwark against chaos. The verdict shifts with the teller and the weather. The details of your death become a favorite subject for the bored and the morbid. People describe your decline in exacting, unnecessary detail, how you wasted away, how the doctors bled you dry, how the castle stank of vinegar and sickness. A new servant, eager to ingratiate himself, tells the story of your final hours with just enough embellishment to earn a laugh or a gasp. For every tale of your glory, there are two of your banality: the stains on your bedclothes, the weakness in your hands, the way even a great duke is brought low by the simple, remorseless workings of time and disease. Your memory is not shaped only by those who loved or hated you. Chroniclers who have never set foot in your castle begin to write their versions of your life, piecing together scraps of gossip, contradictory records, and their own sense of narrative drama. Some paint you as a tragic hero, undone by fate and the envy of lesser men. Others, more skeptical, depict you as a man who clung to power and lost it, as all men do, not in battle, but in bed, sweating and raving and bargaining with priests and doctors until the very end. The clergy keep your memory alive for a while longer, repeating your name in masses and prayers for the dead. But even in the chapel, your legacy dims. After all, there are always new names to pray for, new souls to commend. Your widow, practical as ever, settles into her new role with poise, her mourning more a matter of duty than feeling. Your children begin to argue, scheme, and live as if you were only ever a figure in a portrait, a story told to frighten or inspire. Gradually, you become what all the dead become: a collection of anecdotes, warnings, and half remembered lessons. No one talks of your pain anymore. No one speaks of the endless nights, the humiliations, the hope, and the hopelessness. Instead, you are invoked as evidence, as precedent, as cautionary tale. The truth, with all its uncomfortable shades of gray, becomes a luxury few can afford. And yet, for all this, your memory endures, gloomy, yes, but honest in a way that fame and flattery can never quite match. You are remembered not as a paragon or a villain, but as a man who lived and died much as any other, struggling, erring, suffering, and in the end, losing to the slow, democratic force of disease. Your story becomes a comfort to some, a warning to others, a curiosity to most. In time, even these echoes will fade. The world will forget your voice, your face, your laughter, and your fears. But for a while, at least, there will be those who remember that John the Fearless did not die in battle, but in bed, defeated not by an army or a dagger, but by the body he once trusted and the age in which he lived. If there is any justice, it is this: that you are recalled with a grim, unvarnished honesty, not as a saint or a monster, but as a man, like any other, who came to the end and found it neither glorious nor surprising, just real and human, and finally done.